We are less than 2 years away from the most important World Cup in United States men's national team history, but the excitement is pretty low, rightfully so. I mean, the US men's national team just became the first host nation to get grouped in the Copa America. And at the time of this recording, we don't even have a coach. I mean, we haven't really had an actual coach in a long time because Berhalter, the PE coach, wasn't really a real coach. So will the US men's national team pull a Qatar and get grouped in the World Cup that we will host? Or will they make a deep run like South Korea did in 2002? Here's the thing. Getting a good coach can change everything, and we don't know the max potential of this very talented generation that we currently have. It is still to be determined. So today we have Tab Ramos as a special guest for this interview, but before we start, I have a question for you. Are you concerned about the US men's national team in the 2026 World Cup? I don't think anyone questions the talent that we have. We have good players. Maybe we question the mentality or who will the federation hire as the head coach. But are you concerned? Hi, if you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV, and welcome to part 2 of our interview with Tab Ramos. And in case you didn't know, Tab played 3 World Cups for the US men's national team, one in 1990, then 94, and then 98. He coached the US men's national team U20s, played in La Liga, played in Liga MX, and in MLS. Part 1 was released a day prior to this episode, so go check that out if you want to. We talked about the 1994 World Cup, growth of soccer in America, MLS, and much more. Today's episode, we will talk about Tab's time with the US men's national team U20s. He was a coach there. Why he left, the current state of the US men's national team, some of his outspoken tweets, and whether or not he is worried about 2026. As always, if you enjoyed these episodes, make sure to drop a like, and we will bring more guests like Tab Ramos himself. And feel free to let us know in the comment section any future guests that you would like for us to bring to the channel. But remember, realistic guests. Like, I'm not gonna get Cristiano Ronaldo, Neymar, or Messi at Tactical Manager TV. I won't even get Pep Guardiola. Even though me and Pep are BFFs and we even did a vlog together back in 2022, we ain't getting those guys for an interview. So just be realistic. Even though we did get Breck Shea, which I never thought we would. And also a big thank you to everyone that joined our Patreon to support the channel. If you want to join, the link is in the description of this video. All right, let's bring in Tab Ramos. Okay, everyone, part 2, and probably the one people are the most interested in, Tab, the current U.S. men's national team. We just had, I don't think there's any debate here. We had a terrible summer in 2024 for the U.S. men's national team's program. It could get better because there will be change in command. By the time we're recording this, Greg Berhalter has been fired, but we don't know who's the next coach. So it could be for the better, it could be for the worse. We don't know. I'm trying to be optimistic about it. I think it'll be for the best, and I'll remain optimistic about it until we sign a new coach and things don't go well. But I think they will go well. And we're going to talk about whether or not you are worried about 2026 or if you're confident in a second or you're optimistic about it. But Tab, first and foremost, thank you for being here for part 2. And why don't we start with your time in the national team, but not as a player, as a coach. You coached the U20s. You were in the U20 World Cup. You got a signature win. You beat France in the U20 World Cup, something Berhalter didn't do in multiple years in charge of the national team. So a couple things just so our viewers can, maybe they didn't follow along with it. Maybe they were too young. That wasn't too long ago, but some of them might have not followed. A few players that you coached that upset against France in the U20 World Cup. Then I believe you lost to Ecuador in the quarterfinals, if I'm not mistaken, a very good Ecuadorian side. And then why did you leave? Because you weren't fired. You left. A few reasons of like, why did you leave?
So are we starting with how I got started or why did I leave? Which one of the two?
Let's start with how you got there. Why did you take that job? What was your goal with it? And then you can go to why did you leave? And I know you worked with Weah was in that team, Richards. There were some really good players, but why did you even take that job?
Well, after I retired from playing, I wasn't sure I wanted to be a coach. I was the type of player that never really listened to my coach, let's say. I didn't really care too much about the tactics of the team. I always did as a player the minimum requirement to stay on the field. So if the coach said, you got to get back and defend this guy on this side or whatever, I just did the minimum requirement. But I knew I had to stay fresh enough to do something on the other end so that they couldn't pull me off. That was it. That was the extent of my tactical awareness.
Confession. You just confessed that to everyone.
Yes. So that was the extent of it. So when I retired from playing, I actually took, with a bunch of other players, I took my B course just because they were doing it. I didn't want to do it, and I did it anyway. And when I took my B course, I realized how little I knew about soccer, right? And this is going back all the way to 2002. So this is just a couple months after I retired, and so because of that, I took another course at. And then the next course I was in, it wasn't a license. It was just a course where some speakers were coming in. I sat next to Xavier Ascargorta, who coached Bolivia at the World Cup, was coaching Valencia, I think, when I was at Betis in Spain. Anyway, long story short, we knew each other by name and by just seeing each other. So I happened to be sitting next to him. This was up in Connecticut in a course. And he sits next to me and he says, this is now like 2003, around that time. And he says to me, he's like, what are you doing here? And I go, well, I think I want to be a coach. And he goes, when did you retire? And I said, well, I just retired last year. And he goes, well, if you retired last year, it means you know nothing about soccer. And I was like, okay. And that's actually kind of how I feel. I know very little. Like, I should know more. I played in 3 World Cups. I played in the Olympics. I played in Spain. And I feel like I know so little, right? And he says, well, I would recommend this. I think you have to go coach children and learn how to teach the game. If you learn how to teach the game, then you can become a coach. And I really took that to heart. I actually spent about 7 or 8 years coaching only youth. I started with U9s. I did a full year U9. I did a full year U10, full year U11s, full year U12, full year U13, all the way up to U15. And then I did, I think, U17s and U19s, something like that. But I put in a lot of time. And in the meantime, I took my A license. I loved it. I felt like I learned a lot. I went to the FIFA Symposium in Germany after the 2006 World Cup. I was doing all I could to learn a lot about the game, about tactics, and more importantly, I was learning how to teach the game because that's really important. So I'd learned from teaching an 8-year-old how to kick with the instep, how to pass with the inside of the foot, all the way to tactical movements and how to find players in the hole and the areas of the field. So I learned a lot. And then I called the coach. I sent him an email, Escargorta, and I said, this is like 8 years later. And I go, hey, I did what you told me. And now I've had this opportunity. Wilmer Cabrera asked me to come in to help him out for a week or two with the under-17s. And I went, and Wilmer was really nice to me. It was my first experience with the youth national teams. They were in residency at the time. From there, Thomas Rongen was the coach of the under-20s, and he heard that I had come in. And he invited me to go to the under-20s. And so I became assistant coach with Thomas Rongen in the under-20 national team. At the end of that cycle, I came to a few trips with the under-20s. But at the end of that cycle, Thomas Rongen got fired. And when he got fired, U.S. Soccer called me and they said, Tab, we have a trip to France. We have to play France twice, but we just fired Thomas. So we'd like for you to take the team to France. And I go, well, I'm sorry, but I can't do that because I'm on Thomas's staff. I can't take a job when he brought me in. It'll look like I just dumped him off. And he goes, no, Thomas recommended that you become the head coach for this trip. So I said, okay, well, let me call Thomas and then I'll call you guys back. So I did that. Thomas Rongen was great. He's like, Tab, you got to do this. Go for it. Blah blah blah. So I did it, and then the U20 job was open. I interviewed for it. And I ended up, it's a little bit of a long story, but I'll leave it at that. I ended up getting the job as U20 coach. This is back in 2011. At the same time, Bob Bradley got fired that summer, and Jurgen Klinsmann was brought in. And so because I was part of the process of becoming the new U20 coach, they put me on Jurgen's staff for his first game in Philadelphia, which I remember, I think Breck Shea scored against Mexico.
Hey, one thing, I like the Breck Shea reference right there.
Yeah, I like Breck.
One of my favorite players here.
I tell you what, Breck Shea and Cameron are two of my favorite guys. You can say whatever you want.
They live in Miami there, and I'm trying to connect. I've had them both on the channel. Jeff will talk for hours if you let him.
Yeah.
So Breck is a little bit more like he'll keep.
And by the way, I say those two names together because those guys are always together.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, I love those guys. They're great guys. And so anyway, so I got on his staff, and then I became the head coach of the under-20s that way. Became then youth technical director because that was a vacancy. Claudia Reyna had left, and I became under-20 national team coach in 2011, and both under-20 national team coach and youth technical director in 2013. And I stayed all the way until 2019. I did 4 World Cups with the under-20s, 3 of which we went to the quarterfinals. I created the under-16 national team, which we didn't have. I created the under-19 national team, which we didn't have, because I felt those two were great places to find new players for the under-17s and for the under-20s. And we had a hole there. And that worked out great. I mean, the results are what they are. I think we ended up with a great generation of players and had a lot of success. Unfortunately, we lost at the quarterfinals of 3 consecutive World Cups. And that's a shame because I really do feel like in both 2019 and 2015, both of those teams could have gone further with a little bit of luck, with a bounce here and there. But unfortunately, it didn't happen.
And why did you leave?
And so by 2019, a lot of things started to change at U.S. Soccer. Dan Flynn had been sick for a while, I think, and I think because of that, maybe Jay Berhalter had taken more responsibility on a lot of things that were happening at U.S. Soccer. A lot of things started to change. We didn't have the resources anymore, and I think that maybe that also had partly it had to do with U.S. Soccer didn't really have enough money to continue the programs I was running. Because whatever programs we were running, then they would have to run them for the women's team also. So instead of maybe running more programs for the women's team, they decided, hey, we'll take away from the men's teams, and that's how we'll even things out. And it just felt like the environment was not the best for me to grow the program anymore. I felt like I had grown the program as much as I could, although I had ideas to do a lot more. We still didn't have a full-time goalkeeper director. We didn't have full-time assistant coaches at any level. We still didn't have a U9 team full-time head coach. We still didn't have a U16 full-time head coach, which I had to bring in Sean Sekiris and Luchi Gonzalez to coach the U16s together. And they did it for free. They didn't get paid. They were like volunteers. So I had to bring guys in. I was trying to bring like guys who knew the environment, who had potentially played for the national team before, who knew international soccer, and who really had a passion for coaching. That's who I wanted as part of our staff. Brad Friedel and all those guys. I brought Marcel Balboa, I brought Kobe Jones, I brought like a lot of guys were involved with all the programs. And I think that really worked because the players were seeing that their mentors were guys who had been there and done that. And that really worked with the programs. And I felt like all of that was being left behind. And I felt like I had 2 years remaining in my contract in 2019. I had one more cycle that I could have done. But at that time, although, obviously Houston Dynamo was not, let's say, not the best place to go at the time, I decided to leave anyway, just because I didn't want to stay with the way things were going. So I decided to pick up and go.
So it's more of the direction that U.S. Soccer was heading there in that time. And I even want to bring up the tweet that you put out recently, this one right here, because I think when you put it on X, sometimes we can't write too much, so it misses out on context and what you mean, and people speculate. So just for context here, you mentioned 2018, 2019. That is roughly 6 years ago when you left, roughly. And I tweeted out, what a catastrophic summer for the U.S. men's national team. We have to figure it out as soon as possible. We have less than 2 years for the 2026 World Cup, and we're a complete joke right now. We've just been a really bad summer. I don't have to go through that. People watching it know. You replied to my tweet, and as you can see, I liked your tweet. I really liked it. I thought it was a very good one. You put, it's hard to erase 6 years of methodology in a couple months. It'll take a different type of coach at the senior level, one with a very strong mentality as a start, hoping for a fresh start as soon as possible. Can you expand on that 6-year methodology so the viewers can understand what you meant? And then you, if you want to also pinch in of what you mean by a different coach at a senior level, how he would impact all of that, because you worked at the youth rank, so you'll know how much of a role the senior coach plays a role on every single age category almost with the senior team. Can you expand on that for us as much as you want?
Yeah, I mean that's no problem. It's very simple actually. When you have we've been over the last 6 years, we've had a way of doing things. I call it methodology here in the air quotes. The real quotes there, but air quotes as I'm speaking. And when you have that long of a period of time, because don't forget that we put that in this in context. I think your tweet was right after the Olympic team got eliminated, right?
Yes.
So that's where we were. And my thought was, my idea was more to protect the Olympic team a little bit and not so much, and I think talk a little bit more about how U.S. Soccer has now decided to make a change. Well, the change doesn't happen the day they decided that the current coach doesn't continue. Don't forget that this Olympic team was put together under the old methodology, right? With the old regime and with the way things were done and with the way that we play out of the back no matter what, and the way so those are all
Verhalter ball. Verhalter ball is what we
well,
call it.
I mean, whatever you want to call it, that he was the coach, and 6 years is a long time, and that doesn't change. That doesn't change in 3 weeks because we just decided to change the coach, and now we have a team playing. Same for the under-20s. I don't know. Obviously, under-20s could have won the final. It was a good game. Obviously, they're no one is to blame. The fact is, what happens is we've been playing in a certain way. And by the way, we should. There's nothing wrong with that. So when you have a senior, and I'll go to structure, you have a senior national team coach, he kind of implements the way the senior national team play. Every team under that should try to do the best they can to find the best players. That's number one. You got to find the best players. And second, mold them in a way that they will fit in to the senior national team as soon as possible. Right? So if you get to replace one and somebody's doing great at the under 17s and you feel like Pulisic was at the time when Jurgen was there, he fit into going right into the senior team. Let's bring him right to the senior team. Skip everything else, right? And so you want to have a way. And my tweet was saying, there's a way now. That way is going to change depending on who's next. And my thought about saying someone with a strong mentality is because somebody has to put a hard stop at this point. And that's why I say strong mentality, because it can't be, okay, let's just keep all the youth teams playing the same way and then we'll just pick a coach. And then, no, I think now it has to be a hard stop. It has to be, okay, we have to move in this different direction. And we tried with one coach. Unfortunately, that didn't work like we hoped it would. Now we need someone else. And when we have someone else, that has to change in a certain way. So that was, I don't know if that explains it correctly, but it takes a little bit of time. So, it is what it is.
I think it's important what you mentioned, especially coming from your experience that you worked with the youth ranks of U.S. Soccer a lot. You built a lot of it, right? You're part of that. So it's quite remarkable to actually hear from someone that knows and lived it that, yes, the senior team coach does have influence over, maybe not direct. He's not there telling the coach like, hey, do this, but he does have an influence on how the youth teams play. Obviously not going there and, hey, play this guy, play that guy. That's not what the senior team coach is doing, but he definitely has a lot of influence on how the youth teams are playing as well.
And it makes sense, and it should, because otherwise you're not in the same program. You can't just have, separate teams. You have to have a certain way, and that takes a little bit of time. But yeah, that's really what that was. So just like it takes a little bit of time to develop whichever way the team's going to play, now it's going to take a little bit of time to change the mentality of, let's take, for example, playing out of the back, because I love the whole playing out of the back thing, because obviously this is when I go back and I start thinking, okay, I'm from Uruguay, right? And so I'm trying to think of Uruguayan football. I don't think I've ever heard anyone in Uruguay ever mention, oh, we won this game, but we didn't play out of the back so nicely. I've never heard that. Never. Or we lost this game and you know what? We played out of the back really well. Never once, ever in my whole life. And I don't think my whole life I will ever hear that coming out of Uruguay. It'll never. But so this is a good example. So if our mentality has been, oh, we play out of the back no matter what, and we have to, connect passes out of the back in order to go forward. If that's the thought always, then that's the thought that players always have. And so they'll have it at all the different levels. So it takes a little bit of time for somebody to say, look, we'll try to play out of the back. If a couple of times doesn't work, we're going to have our 9 make a diagonal run. We dump it over the top. We get the opposing team facing their own goal. We put a little bit of pressure on, and we win the ball back on their half, and now we play. So I'm just saying that as just one very simple example.
And I mean, it makes sense because we have to also recognize, do we have the players to play out of the back? Like when you're trying to play out of the back in soccer, just a basic concept, you need ball playing defenders that are good on the ball, that are press resistant. You need fullbacks that can build out of the back. Usually nowadays in modern soccer, you need a goalkeeper that can play with his feet. So the question is, sometimes you want to play that way, but is that the best way for our current player pool? Because you do need to deliver results too. We're not like Spain that has a very well-defined style of play from the senior team to the youth team. We know exactly how Spain plays. They don't change it very often, and it works. That's their player pool, their culture. Brazil, Argentina, it seems like the U.S. is still building that. We had an identity many, many years ago, like 15 years ago. We defended very well for our lives. We played as a team, and we hit them on a counter, and we were good at it. We were annoying. Like big teams would not like to play the U.S., but then we tried to change this so quickly with Berhalter, at least, or maybe even prior, who knows, and it's just not, the program's not there. And maybe we're never going to be like that. Maybe our style of play, the American way to play, is not that way. We don't know. We're going to find out over the years. The U.S. is also a very different country, right, from these ones, because when it comes to soccer, we're like a big mix of soccer culture. We have guys developed in England and guys developed in MLS and guys developed a little bit in Mexico and a guys developed in South America. While like you go to the Brazilian national team, they're all developed in Brazil. Spain, they're like 99.9% developed in Spain.
Right, England, but let me say this. Let me just mention this, because obviously you can say that for the country as well. So a player from Michigan is likely much different than a player from Dallas.
True,
right?
Very true.
But a player from Bilbao, Spain, from Basque Country, is much different than a player from Sevilla.
Agreed.
Right? That's almost the same exact example, because a player from Bilbao will be hard. They will be a good player, but they will be hard, and they'll be hardworking, and they're relentless. And a player from Sevilla will have the flair and the I don't care kind of way of playing, right? But when they go to the national team, they fit. They all fit together. Right?
And so because I guess the core of the national team, you already know the culture of how they play, right? Like Spain, you'll get a player from Bilbao, like Nico Williams was playing right now, brilliant player, and very much like how you described. But the core of the team is more that Spanish style of play, which I guess it resembles more Barcelona, at least these days. It's more of what it resembles. And then the other teams can fit into that. They understand it. And of course, like these countries are much smaller than the US, so that does make it a bit easier to unify and move in the same direction. But it's something we're still building. But there was a time where the US had an identity. It doesn't feel like we have that right now.
Well, I think here's the thing that's a little bit lost. And you mentioned part of this, right? You mentioned how hard we always defended, right? I don't think we can lose that, regardless of what the next coach is going to be. True. I think we have to go back to being who we are in a way. And this is not me going back to the 1990s or the 1980s or anything else. If the American players in general don't mind defending, they don't mind working hard. They don't mind. They actually take pride in outworking the opponent. They take pride in that. American players love that. They love being able to run you over, to do more than you, to run faster than you, to be stronger than you. Like they enjoy. So that's part of the culture. I think we need to nurture that And I'm not saying because of that, we need to just play balls in the air and go win. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that's the base for the type of people that we are in this country. That's why we win gold medals in the Olympics. That's why we have some of the fastest guys in the world. That's what all of those things need to be made into who we are. And I think we need to nurture that. And then we need to play forward more because we do have good players, because we have, the Christian Pulisics of the world now coming along and many more that have a lot of skill. So I think we need to go a little bit back to basics and be hard to play against, number one. And then do more at the other end.
And I'm going to go to another tweet of yours that I thought was you were very outspoken about it, and you were right. I'm going to show you here about the USMNT coach. And to your point where you were saying about hard to beat, that's something I felt like we were missing the past few years. In the World Cup against the Dutch, it felt like we were defeated ever since they scored the first goal. It didn't feel like there was that belief, and it's like, no, they're going to have to really outwork us to win this. We felt defeated, and I don't see an issue with us losing to the Netherlands in the round of 16. That's a really good team. And even if we played well and we grinded out the result, we could still lose. Morocco in the Olympics. Morocco's an incredible team these days. They just made it to a World Cup semifinal. They had Hakimi there, many good players. They're on the rise. But again, 4-0, I want to see us put up a fight, like go toe-to-toe. For you to get lucky and pull an upset, you need to put yourself in a position to get lucky. You're not going to get lucky if you're down 3-0. You have to keep it even, keep it close. And then, like you said, one ball that's bouncing around the box, you get a goal, 1-0. Now you can pull an upset. Now, if you're down 4-0, how the heck are you going to pull an upset? If you're already down 3-0, 2-0, you're not going to do it. You're playing against a better team. And I hope the future coach understands that, which it's not that hard of a concept. And going to this future coach, you said this, and I like what you said. So Taylor Twellman posted a tweet. I don't remember what he said. He deleted the post. I don't think he said anything crazy on this one. But you said, let's hope, forget Twellman for a second. It's more about what you said. He said, let's hope after the new search, we don't end with an MLS coach. We need an experienced international coach to try to get the most out of this team. It's 18, 24-month project. So it's a short project for the World Cup. You are 100% spot on that. Why did you mention not have an MLS coach? Do you remember? I don't remember what you were replying to specifically. I agree with you, just to make that clear from the get-go.
No, I mean, and it wasn't necessarily picking on MLS coaches. It was just the fact that I feel like, I sort of know how the MLS coaches get hired, and they all get hired normally on a basis of developing a project, and we don't really have time for project. We just need to go win games, and so I think we need to get someone. For me, and this is why at one point I mentioned a name like Peckerman. I don't know if you saw that in one of the shows I was on. I mentioned a name like that, and I'm not saying he would be the guy, but I mentioned a name like that because that's someone who's been there in the Olympics and the World Cups. He's coached great players. He's been under pressure. He coached Colombia for a long time. He's Argentine, which is already hard mentality, and I felt like we needed. And again, I don't have a horse in the race in terms of like who's going to get picked, but I think we needed to have someone that's going to come in, and from the first moment that he says, "This is what we're doing," we need the players to follow along with that. Period. Like go like hard stop. This is the way it is now. No, but coach, we used to. It doesn't matter. This is what we're doing now. Like starting today. Not this is not a gradual process. This is how we're going to win games in the World Cup. And then we can all get behind that and say, okay, let's trust this coach that's the way we're going to win the World Cup. And then we don't know if we're going to win the World Cup because ultimately it depends on what your draw is, right? Look at the 2014 World Cup. You must remember that one really well. So we have Ghana in the first game. And then you have
Portugal,
Germany and Portugal. And that Portugal team it's almost like everybody was at their prime at the time. And so would I have said that any of our players, and this is how I look at teams sometimes, if I take our starting 11 and their starting 11, can I put any of my starting 11 on their starting 11? And the answer in that Portugal game would have been no. And the answer in the next game was Germany. The answer would have been no. And so, yeah, in Ghana game, you could throw out certainly guys like Dempsey and Michael Bradley and Jermaine Jones. They could play, although they had Essien in the middle, they had Zhao up front. They had good
It
players.
was a good Ghana team. A good
right.
Ghana team.
And we had Tim Howard, so you would put Tim Howard in the goal there, right? But other than that, that's how you. And then in the second round, you play Belgium, and it's the same thing. That's like that was their golden generation. With you go player by player, and you're like, okay, well, Vertonghen, De Bruyne, Lukaku,
Hazard,
Origi coming off the bench. I mean, it's just a crazy team. Like they were so good. Courtois in the goal, no. And so that's kind of where we are. So yeah, can we do well in the next World Cup? So that's what you're hoping for, and you're also hoping for a little bit of a good draw so that you have an opportunity to do that. Yeah, don't forget 2014, that Germany team that ended up beating us 1-0. Ended up beating Brazil, 7-1. I'm sure
why did you have to bring that up? Why did you have to bring that up? I was in Brazil. I went there for the World Cup. Funny story for you, very quick one. When we played Belgium in the quarterfinals, I went to Teresópolis, which is the headquarter of the training facilities of CBF, the Brazilian Federation, to watch Brazil's practice. And we went to a bar with a friend, and it was US versus Belgium. And I'm pretty much the only one that is rooting for the US there. No one cares. But every time Howard made a save, every time he would do it, all of a sudden, second half or so, all the Brazilians there started to root for the US. Just became like the underdog, because it was like we're getting so much dominated, and this guy's like playing the game of his life right now, Tim Howard. And then it was just funny to see all the Brazilians, they're just kind of like going for the US. And
by the way, in that game, if you remember, because you just mentioned, how do you put yourself in position to win a game? So if you go out and you play against Belgium, you lose 5-0. Mm-hmm. So you really can't play against Belgium. You try to hold the fort and try to get them. And if you remember in that game, obviously we got hammered in that game. There's no way.
We could have won though.
But we had a set play at the end of the game where Wondolowski has a chance to score. So, I mean, you give yourself.
We put ourselves in a position to get lucky. That was my, right? Because if we were down 4-0, it doesn't, even if Wando scores that, it doesn't matter. But we put ourselves, obviously Howard played a massive role, having a goalkeeper of that caliber. Right. But last but not least with this, are you worried about 2026? Because it felt like, regardless of the new coach, it felt like the current crop of players, they're very talented, they're very good. The leaders felt very comfortable with Greg Berhalter. We saw that in press conferences. It seemed like they were more buddies with him than like an actual, he wasn't really a coaching figure. It seemed like this is our buddy. And that seems like even why a lot of them wanted him to stay. It was just very comfortable with him. Are you worried about that? Do you think that 2026 could be an issue regardless of who we get? Or are you choosing to be optimistic? I'm choosing to be optimistic. I think we're going to hire a good coach. We haven't hired someone at the time of this recording. And I think he'll change that mentality. I think the talent is there. We just need the right guy to be the leader of this group. But how are you feeling right now?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it will have to do with how much our players play wherever they are. Right? Yeah, of course, the coach is going to be important because he has to set the standards. There's no question. But more important than the coach is how much our players are going to be playing overseas and whether they're in position to lead their teams to something. So if you have players like Pulisic have another season like the type of season he had last year, hopefully he could even improve on that. That would be great, right? But he had a very good season. Hopefully you can have players like Gio Reyna finally get on the field and play 30, 40 games during the year. I think he would be a much different player if he played 30 or 40 games. You know, you look at guys like Flo Balogun, whether he's going to get back to the form he was 2 years ago. So a lot of it has to do, unfortunately, that's how the national team works, right? You depend on the form of your players and they have to play. And then the environment within the team. I felt like it's okay for players to be comfortable. I feel like it's okay for the coach to be your buddy and to talk about life with you. But I think there needs to be a hard stance in terms of, okay, now we're going to practice. Okay, now we're going to the game. And now I'm a sub, but I want to win a position from the guy that's playing on the field. I felt like the comfort level was was more general, not just the guys playing, but the guys not playing. And when you have the guys not playing comfortable with not playing, that doesn't push the guys.
Comfortable or just complacent about it?
I'm
Because
not sure. I'm not sure. But that was sort of the feeling, and I started to get the feeling when I heard Tillman in an interview say he was playing really well for PSV at the time, and they asked him about coming in to play for the national team, and I think I read, I don't want to misquote, but something to the effect of, well, we have Gio Reyna in that position, so that's hard for me to play. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're playing every week for a club that's like an important club. And you're saying you have basically no shot at playing because you have a player who's not playing in front of you?
I mean, that's the message Berhalter sent multiple times, because he would get, I'm going to give an example, and I don't want to pick on this player because I think he's crucial for the U.S. men's national team success in 2026. But when you have a player like Tyler Adams that hasn't played in a year almost because he's injured, and then he comes into the national team, and don't get me wrong, Tyler's an incredible player, but we're not talking about Messi. If you have Messi on one foot, on one leg, oh, Messi, come in, you're playing. You're Messi. Ronaldo, Neymar, that's not Tyler Adams. He's a really good player, but he's not a Messi. And then he comes in and you just start him right away. And then when you sub him out mid-game because he can't play full, he's not fully fit, he pretty much confronts the coach on the sideline, and you're seeing that happen. You're sending a message to your players that it's like, I got my favorites. These guys will start no matter what. So don't really question it. Just be here. Be happy to be here. That was the message that was sent in multiple occasions from Greg Berhalter, from what I felt like. And not just Tyler. We can talk about other players too with favoritism in the past. Some of his veterans, a lot of them were the MLS veterans that the fan base started to pick on these players because of Berhalter, right? It took a Paul Arriola injury for him to finally start way over Arriola. And then the difference was so obvious when it happened. And I think that comes from the coach. And then you talked about Tillman's interview. I know you didn't put the exact quote because you don't remember exactly what he said, but you got like the vibe of what he was saying. That is the culture that the coach implements in the team. It has to be like, guys, no one should be comfortable with their starting position. You can be comfortable as a friend of the coach, but your starting position ain't safe, man. You have to grind it out every day, have to play well every day. This is not a position that you lock in for 4 years and it's yours no matter what happens. And it felt like that was the culture that was built. That was the culture that was, some players are untouchable. I guess some of them rightfully so. And that's just what it is. And it felt like he built cliques in this national team. Again, speculation from my end based on what we're calculated speculation based on what we see. You don't have to comment on that. I know you're not there also, so you won't be able to know this, but a new coach has to do that. But back to the question, are you worried about 2026?
I mean, at this point, I would say yes. I'm worried because, obviously I thought that we were moving in a direction, like all along. We didn't necessarily see it on the field, but at least we felt like the 2026 World Cup was going to be so important that it's one that we couldn't miss. I think the fact that U.S. Soccer made a change, I think they recognize that as well. They're telling us they're worried, and I think that's a good thing. And so we'll see. I think we need, obviously, when the new coach comes in and we see what his approach is and what he says and how things are going to work, and give him a few months to work with that. Because let's not forget that at the end of the day, it's not about bringing this incredible tactician. I think we need more a change of mentality at this point. Mm-hmm. And don't forget the national team. You come in and you train for 3 days and you got to play a game. So it's not, you rarely have any time. It's not normal for a coaching process to develop a way to play. So I'm worried, but I think I believe in the strength of the mentality of the players. I think they will overcome everything that happened before and put it behind them. And hopefully we get, again, this relentless American team that's really hard to beat and that's a pest all over the field. And then with the players that we have from the midfield forward, I trust that they can give us some wins.
Okay, we'll close it here with a quick yes or no question. Would you be open to going back to the U.S. youth national teams at some point, one day? Or it's something that's past you?
At some point, I would say yes. You're always open to the national team program. Sure.
Okay, that's good to hear because I
Yeah.
think you did a great job there. And maybe if we get back in the right direction, we can, not we, like it's not my decision, but hopefully
Right.
convince you to come back and continue to build upon what you started, continue what you started. Tab, thank you very much. This was a wonderful episode. Both of them. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it, and continue your good work.
Thank you, Tab.